Eating disorders. See, our body is nothing but an interconnected landscape, right? Of our thoughts, emotions, experiences, interactions, and all the physical parts of our body. That's what makes us, right? That's what makes us the entire human being. And the eating disorder is something that actually I'm it's very dear to me because I always eat wrong. And I don't know, I'm preaching here the choir, I'm preaching all of you, but I'm the one who's having problems. So but all of us have, right? I mean, that's what makes us all human. And so we have invited a naturopathic doctor, Dr. Alexandra. She is focuses on eating disorders. Hi there, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
Great, great, great. I was just telling our viewers that we are going to be talking about eating disorders. I think all of us experience some type of eating disorder here and there. I know I do on a daily basis, right? So that is what we are going to be talking with Dr. Alexandra. She's a naturopathic doctor who's also a Reiki practitioner. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, and then what made you focus on eating disorder, which is such an amazing, amazing topic.
Thank you. Yeah, so I am a naturopathic doctor based out of Toronto in Ontario. And one of the things that really drew, as a naturopath, we are trained in mind body medicine. And so we have all of those foundations of how we can treat our physical health, and then also everything as well, some training in mental, emotional, how our mind, body, spirit all integrate to how we're to all contribute to how we're feeling mentally, emotionally, physically. And that gives us a really interesting lens of treating mental health because it allows us to look at the person as a whole and not just as different compartments. And so everything that's happening physiologically in our bodies influences how we're feeling mental, emotionally, and vice versa. And with eating disorders, especially because they involve food and overwhelm and stress around food, food impacts both our mental, emotional health because of that emotional response that we get and stress, but also the food that we eat, it influences our physiology and how we feel in our bodies. And then how we feel in our bodies also influences how we're able to eat.
So, okay, so what exactly is an eating disorder? What is the definition, right? I mean, all of us eat every day anyway, but what
Yeah.
defines that, okay, I have an eating disorder versus someone else?
So there's different grades, and with eating disorders, they are defined similarly to other mental health conditions in the DSM, which is kind of like the diagnostic criteria. And then there are a couple of different ones: anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. And each of these has their own criteria. But then whether disordered eating doesn't necessarily need to meet these criteria. And disordered eating, which is something that a lot of people experience all the time, is more or less characterized by stress or overwhelm around food, or using food in a manipulative or manipulating food to serve a purpose, whether it is helping us to manage, whether it is for changing the way our body is. But the main differentiating factor between disordered eating and not is the amount of overwhelm and the amount of time and energy that thinking and engaging with food is taking.
Okay, so there's a fine line, right, between being a foodie and someone who's really obsessed with food.
It is. And this also, it is a very fine line because the main difference, it is totally normal to engage with food, to enjoy it. It's something that we need to have every single day to keep our body working and thriving and so that we feel good.
Yeah.
And it also is a huge social aspect for a lot of us. It's a way to get together with friends and have a great time, and it can be a really enjoyable thing. When things kind of shift between being a foodie and really enjoying food to having disordered eating, is when food starts to cause distress in
Mm-hmm.
other aspects of our life.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a very basic way, that could be, for example, feeling guilt around eating a certain way, or beating ourselves up, or judging ourselves based on the food that we're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be classified as a type of disordered eating as well, because what it's doing is putting a meaning
Mm-hmm.
on something that doesn't exist. We are somehow attributing our worth or how good of a person we are
Mm-hmm.
to the food that we're choosing to eat,
Mm.
which isn't actually correlated at all.
That's interesting what you say that. So it has a clear mental to our eating, right? It's all connected, how we feel. And so now when we talk about eating disorder, is there like in your experience, have you noticed a particular type of food that people would crave, for example, I'm talking specifically about the eating disorders. Like most of the people who have eating disorders, would they eat more ice cream versus more an X type of food, or is it like anything that I can get my hands on?
Yeah, so it's completely dependent on the person,
Mm-hmm.
and the actual food itself isn't necessarily the most important part or the defining feature, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more the way that the person is engaging with food.
I see.
So that, does that make sense?
Yeah, so engaging with food means, let's say I had my breakfast and now suddenly I'm eating something else and then I leave and something else. Is that what it is? Eating disorder, or I eat at night? I mean, is it too frequent? Is it eating at odd times? Is it eating wrong foods? What would be like the definition, right?
Yeah, so the definition is less about the actual actions and the patterns,
Okay.
but it's the mental emotional response
Hmm.
that engaging with food elicits.
I see.
So it can be like the judgment, the like it is called like eating or thinking about food or using it in some way. It is causing some type of distress.
Mm. Oh wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and whether that's something like a very easy example to kind of this is obviously different when there is like a
Of course.
pathologic eating
Of course.
disorder, but so let's say for example you um let's say you eat something like that you didn't necessarily want to, or like you eat a whole pizza or something like
Hmm.
that, which is a totally normal okay thing to do,
Hmm. Hmm.
but suddenly it kind of sets off this whole cascade of like self-talk, really negative self-talk, and like this idea that you've done something wrong and that your worth as a human being has changed because of the food that you chose to eat or engage with.
Oh my God. Wow. That's serious then.
Yeah, so it is quite serious, and it takes a really intense mental emotional toll, and they are not, when it is a pathological eating disorder, the it is a very acute amount of stress, and it is exhausting, and it is really debilitating.
But okay, wow. So how do you get over something like this? I mean, that's like, are you working on the mental level for with that person to make sure that eating disorders kind of disappears after some time? Or how does this therapy work just on a framework point of view?
Yeah, so from my approach as an ND, we work on kind of three separate pillars, is what I
Mhm.
would refer to them as. So
Okay.
one is actually looking at this relationship with food itself and
Mhm.
on a daily basis,
Mhm.
because one of the distinguishing factors is that food and engaging with food, thinking about it, is causing distress. Whether it's eating it, whether it's not eating it, whether it's thinking about it, or
Mhm.
whatever, it's causing some type of mental emotional distress for the person.
Mhm.
And so because we have to eat every single day to survive,
Yeah.
that is something that we do need to address. That so part of it is looking at this daily experience with food. How is it making you feel? What kind of stress is it causing? And where we can minimize that as much as possible.
Mhm.
So there's one, working with that mental emotional piece on a daily basis.
Mhm.
The second part is actually supporting our body from a physical perspective, because there are different physiological processes going on, whether it's hormonal, whether it's nervous system, whether it's digestion,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's trauma. All of these things can influence the way our body needs or uses food,
Mm-hmm.
which can contribute to how we feel when we're eating. So we also work on supporting patients from that physical place, and bringing their body back into balance so that and if there's any triggers from a physical place,
Mm-hmm.
we can minimize that as much as possible.
So do you
And
also
then,
use like cognitive behavioral therapy? I mean, those kind of techniques or tools?
yes, so that can be a definite part of it as well. And it does, working with a therapist in conjunction can also be a really, really good tool. But part of it is reframing some of the meaning that has been attached to different foods.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, an eating disorder is often a coping mechanism
Mm-hmm.
for for greater things that are going on below the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Engaging with food the way that people are is a way um, to make it easier, even though the disorder itself is distressing.
I see.
So we
And
also look at what's going on beyond the food, whether there's any comorbid conditions, whether it's depression, anxiety,
mm-hmm.
PTSD, whether it's something physiological, so we can support the person as a whole and help them to feel better
Mm-hmm.
so that they do have an easier relationship with food.
Got it, got it. So what are your thoughts about intuitive eating?
So intuitive eating, for anyone who doesn't know, intuitive eating is this idea of listening to your body instead of all of this criteria of you need to be eating X, Y, and Z at this time, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, all of these different rules that are out there. Intuitive eating is more this idea of each person is an individual and they have individual needs in terms of nutrition and
Mm-hmm.
hunger and appetite and etc. And every day those needs will be different based on how much exercise we've done or how much we've eaten before or whether we're overworked or tired or any of those different things. So it is about, okay, what does my body need right now?
Mm-hmm.
What do I feel like? What types of foods am I craving?
Mm-hmm.
What am I hungry? Am I full? And it's trying
Mm-hmm.
to really work on this connection between our minds and our bodies
Mm-hmm.
to help us um, to help us eat in a different way instead of listening to all of these rules. It can be a really great tool.
Okay.
It is a very challenging thing in eating disorders, and it often does not work.
Mm.
And part of that is because when we are in acute distress, like whether, and this is something that probably a lot of people have experienced, when you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
you might need more food, more energy. Or you might feel sick. You might not feel hungry. You might not be able to eat because of the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
There our minds, they influence how our bodies feel and our thoughts around food, because our nervous system in our head and our nervous system in our stomach are really, really interconnected. And so for people with eating disorders who are in distress every day
Mm-hmm.
over food, they are in this state of overwhelm constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very unclear
Mm-hmm.
what their body is saying.
Mm-hmm.
This nervous system response, it overrides these hunger cues. So a lot of people with eating disorders, they don't feel hungry, they don't feel full. And when they try an intuitive eat, it can actually just make them feel worse, make
Mm-hmm.
them feel like they're failing because they aren't able to connect with that part,
Yeah.
or actually exacerbate some of these patterns that they're already engaging with, because they won't be hungry even though they physically need food.
Wow, this is very complicated, more complicated than any one of us realized, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
I always thought eating disorder is something like you start eating too much ice cream, but it's more than that, you know.
no, it definitely, it's so much more than that.
So what are your, I mean, what would you like to tell the viewers or someone who has eating disorder? What should they do? How do they start the journey of being normal?
Yeah, so part of it is finding support.
Okay.
One of the hardest parts with an eating disorder is that we have to engage with food every single day.
Hmm.
And getting some type of support around that can be really helpful in just decreasing the intensity of everything that's happening
Yeah.
for them. The other thing to remember is that there isn't any right or wrong way to recover or get support in an eating disorder.
Hmm.
But the main thing is that you're not alone in it.
Yeah.
There are people out there who can help, and you're not alone in feeling the way that you are,
Hmm.
especially around food. And so getting support would be one of the most important things I would say to start, because it can just help to um, add some clarity to the overwhelm that's going on.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I think these are really great tips for all of us. I mean, all of us have some kind of an eating disorder when we are stressed. I know
Yeah,
all of us when we get overwhelmed and there's anxiety, and then I know I start eating chocolate or some strange things it happens to every one of us. It's just a question of intensity, right? The degree of eating disorder that each one of us face.
exactly. And the intensity is the most important thing, and it's
Yeah.
how it differentiates all mental emotional conditions, because in essence, like, we all go through periods of, feeling lower mood, or we all go
Mhm.
through periods of
Yes.
more anxiousness or higher stress, or of being overwhelmed with food, or eating because of overwhelm. But it is the intensity to which it's impacting your functioning on a daily basis, and the consistency that really differentiates it.
Mhm.
Because physiologically, it makes sense. When we're stressed, we need sugar because we need energy. So
Yeah.
our body will crave these things. So it makes sense, but it's when it becomes debilitating from a mental emotional perspective, that's when it kind of differentiates it in terms of an eating disorder versus just quote unquote normal stress around food.
Correct. Correct. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. I think this is very insightful for all the people who have eating disorders. Seek help from someone like yourself, from someone like Dr. Alexander, who is a specialist, who can help you with eating disorders. And anything else that you want feedback, feel free to reach out to us, and we will connect you with Dr. Alexander. That's not an issue. I know people joining right now. We are almost going to wrap up and sign off the session. The topic has been on eating disorders. That is what we've been talking about. Anything else you'd like to add before I wrap up?
No, I just thank you so much for having me on today. It was so nice to chat with you, especially just about a topic that is so prevalent but misunderstood in a lot of
Yes,
different ways.
yes,
And so I know it can be really hard for people to reach out for support when um, when it doesn't feel like there's necessarily something wrong or something bad going on. But anytime that you're in distress, mental, emotionally, or the food that you're eating is feeling like it's influencing your worth,
hmm,
it's always worth seeking help, because in essence, the food that we eat, it can't change who we are or
yes.
our value in the
Hmm.
world.
Hmm. All right, with that thought, thank you again. I'd like to wrap up the session. To all the viewers, thank you for your support. People who are joining, you can catch the live, the recorded Insta live on our feed. And the topic has been eating disorders. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra, for being with us. Bye now.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yes,
Bye.
bye bye.